Welcome, my weird witches. You've found Raven's Lorecast, where folklore, fire, and a little fierce honesty all meet in the same cauldron. I'm Raven Lorekeeper, storyteller, witch, and your unapologetic guide through myth, magic, and all the places the world told you not to wander. This podcast exists because magic deserves to be honest, witchcraft deserves to be inclusive, and every one of us who grew up other deserves a place to finally exhale. So pour yourself something comforting, settle in, and remember, the world may not have been built for us, but the magic was. There comes a night when the witch stops waiting for permission, when the word other stops being an accusation and becomes a battle cry, when you don't just guard the flame, you throw the torch. Tonight is one of those nights. Outside, the moon is half full, brightening herself out of the dark. A first quarter moon hangs there like a vow, the light after emptiness, growing louder by the hour. The pulse between your ribs quickens, and the sky itself whispers, not someday, now. This is not a time for balance. This is a time for ignition. Every scar you've carried, kindling. Every doubt you've swallowed, oxygen. Every time you were told to be quiet, to be smaller, to be nice, that was someone trying to build a fire break around your power. And here's the part nobody tells you. When the world tried to exile the witch, something older opened a door instead. So before we go any further, I want you to find your own flame. Maybe it's a candle you light every time you listen. Maybe it's the stove burner in your tiny kitchen. Maybe it's just the heat of your own palm resting over your heart. Whatever it is, connect to it. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Hold it. And let it go in a long exhale, like you're blowing softly on embers and waking them up. Again, in and out. Imagine with each breath the coals of your spirit going from dull red to bright orange to white hot. Tonight, we call the names of every witch, healer, wise one, and holy troublemaker who refused to roll over. The midwives who caught babies and kept death at bay even when the church said their work was ungodly. The medicine keepers whose hands remembered the language of plants long after their languages were outlawed. The dreamers and diviners whose visions made kings nervous and priests furious. The ones who hid their altars in broom closets, in back bedrooms, in plain sight on kitchen counters. The ones who were burned, the ones who lived. The ones who learned to wear their power like armor made of smoke and stubbornness. Their legacy is not caution. Their legacy is courage. They did not survive so you could sit there apologizing for your own existence. They did not endure fire and exile so you could dim yourself to make other people comfortable. They survived so you could roar. They endured so you could thrive. So, if it's safe to do so, whisper this with me, or just say it in your head if that's what you've got tonight. I am the witch they warned you about. I am the fire that rises again. I am the other, and I am unstoppable. Feel how that lands in your body. Maybe you feel silly. Maybe you feel goosebumps. Maybe you feel nothing yet. That's okay. The spell still took. Your cells heard you. Before we step into tonight's lore, I want you to know something. Tonight is the beginning of a new journey, one we will return to again and again, quarter after quarter, year after year. This is the first chapter in an ongoing series called On Being a Witch, a long, deep excavation of what it actually means to walk this path. Not the Instagram version, not the aesthetic version, not the version shaped by fear, fantasy, or centuries of propaganda. The real version, the living version, the one that hums under your skin even if you don't have words for it yet. Each quarter, we'll explore another facet of the witch's identity. The witch as other, the witch as remembering, the witch as maker, the witch as mirror, the witch as healer, the witch as trickster, the witch as bridge, the witch as flame. Think of these as way stations, lantern-lit checkpoints on a trail your ancestors walked long before you. And we begin, as all witch stories do, with the other. The witch has always been the one at the edge, the border walker, the misfit, the anomaly that didn't fit cleanly into the empire's categories. Sometimes fear made us other. Sometimes brilliance did. Sometimes survival did. But here's the secret they never meant for you to discover. Every witch begins in exile, but we don't stay there. We turn the threshold into a doorway. We turn the doorway into a home. We turn the home into a cauldron where we remake ourselves. Tonight, we begin that remembering. Welcome, weirdlings. Welcome to Raven's Lorecast. The fire is rising. Let's see what happens when we stop pretending we're not the ones holding the matches. Wit, wisdom, witchcraft. Before we talk about what a witch is, we need to talk about what the world has repeatedly tried to make us out to be. Because the witch is not simply a figure of magic. She is a figure of projection. Across history, empires have taken whatever they feared most, autonomy, intuition, embodied knowledge, uncontrolled wisdom, and stamped it onto people they could not easily govern. And then they called it dangerous. This is not coincidence. This is pattern. Whenever sacred knowledge exists outside centralized authority, power labels it a threat. The language shifts depending on time and place. Heresy, superstition, madness, degeneracy, savagery, witchcraft. But the fear underneath never changes. What happens if people remember they can heal, interpret, commune, and make meaning without permission? Empires answer that question with violence, and witches answer it by surviving. In ancient Egypt, priestesses of Isis presided over healing, grief rites, fertility, sexuality, midwifery, and death. They held medical knowledge, ritual authority, and cosmological literacy in equal measure. When Egypt was absorbed by Greek and Roman power, Isis was stripped of her living priesthood and reduced to mythology. an object of fascination rather than authority. This move is crucial to understand. Empires do not always destroy sacred figures outright. Sometimes they museumify them. A goddess in a story is harmless. A woman wielding her power in real time is not. In Sumer, some of the earliest written records show women as scribes, astronomers, dream interpreters, tracking the heavens, reading omens, and recording divine messages. But as states consolidated, temples became bureaucracies, power hardened, access narrowed. Suddenly, heaven was declared no place for women's hands, because when power centralizes, it always tries to capture the sky. In early Indian tantric traditions, divinity was not hierarchical. Shakti and Shiva were interdependent forces. The body itself was a site of revelation. Sexuality, breath, and sensation were sacred technologies. Later patriarchal systems sanitized Tantra into something safer, narrower, and easier to regulate. The divine feminine went from half the cosmos to something dangerous if left uncontained. In China, Wu, shamans, often women, served as healers, diviners, spirit mediators. They diagnosed illness not just in bodies, but in families, communities, and ancestral lines. As Confucian imperial systems formalized, ecstatic practice was replaced with obedience and order. A woman who spoke with spirits without authorization became a liability. Across cultures, the message was the same. Direct access to meaning makes people difficult to govern. When brute force alone proved insufficient, empire refined its methods. Enter the missionary. Missionaries did not arrive after conquest. They arrived with it. They were not neutral carriers of faith. They were infrastructure. Spiritual conversion was used to dismantle cosmologies, sever relationships with ancestors, criminalize land-based ritual, erase gender-diverse sacred roles, reframe indigenous wisdom as sin or superstition. This is not accidental. It was strategic. Across Polynesia and the South Pacific, cosmology was inseparable from land, sea, and lineage. Knowledge was encoded in chant, navigation, genealogy, and ritual practice. Women often held ceremonial authority, especially around birth, death, and inheritance. Missionaries reframed these systems as pagan and immoral. Sacred chants became songs. Ancestor veneration became idolatry. Ocean-based cosmologies were dismissed as myth rather than science, despite the fact that Polynesian navigators crossed thousands of miles of open water using stellar, oceanic, and environmental knowledge Western science is still studying. Women's ritual authority was quietly erased. Not debated, not disproven, erased. Because a woman who holds the map to both land and sky cannot be easily ruled. In the Amazon, shamans and plant knowledge holders practiced medicine that treated body, psyche, community, and spirit as inseparable. Colonial forces labeled these practices demonic. Plants were outlawed, ceremonies criminalized, languages suppressed. And then, centuries later, the same plants were extracted, studied, patented, monetized. The witch is dangerous until her knowledge is profitable. Then she becomes a resource to be mined. Across West Africa, diviners, herbalists, and Orisha devotees held spiritual authority that included women, queer people, and gender-expansive practitioners. Colonization arrived with guns, Bibles, and a demand for flattening. Drums were banned, shrines burned, spirits renamed demons, and yet rhythms travel. These traditions crossed the ocean in memory and body, becoming Vodou, Santeria, Candomblé, living systems that survived because they adapted without surrendering their core. In the Americas, indigenous medicine keepers were targeted through forced conversion, stolen children, outlawed ceremonies, and criminalized languages. And today, their descendants still fight for the right to practice what was never lost, only suppressed. The witch is not a European archetype. The witch is anyone whose way of knowing threatens the story power wants to tell about itself. Here is the part empires never account for. When institutions burn libraries, witches become living vessels of knowledge. Knowledge does not only live in books. It lives in bodies, breath, hands, recipes, lullabies, seasonal rituals, muscle memory. This is why witches were so hard to eradicate. When written language was outlawed, wisdom moved into song. When rituals were banned, they hid in kitchens. When altars were destroyed, they appeared in gardens. Women's work became covert resistance, not because it was small, but because it was underestimated. And this is not just history. We see the pattern today. Who is still labeled dangerous? People who refuse reproductive control, queer and trans bodies that defy classification, land defenders who oppose extraction, healers who work outside pharmaceutical monopolies, spiritual practitioners who refuse institutional authority. The language has softened, the fear has not. Empires insist chaos is the enemy of order. Witches know better. Chaos is not destruction. Chaos is creation. Stars are born from collapse. Forests regenerate after fire. Lives transform when something inside finally says, no more. The witch is not chaos because she destroys. She is chaos because she creates. When you claim the word witch, you are not claiming rebellion for rebellion's sake. You are claiming survival. You align yourself with every healer, midwife, root worker, diviner, queer mystic, kitchen witch, and dreamer who refused to hand their power to an empire. You do not need the right tools. You do not need the right aesthetic. You do not need anyone's permission. You were not born other. You were cast as other because people who know their own magic are difficult to rule. Reclaiming the word witch is defiance, but it is also remembering. This is why the first chapter of On Being a Witch is the witch as other. Before we heal, before we bridge, Before we mirror or trick or burn the old world down, we recognize the forces that tried to name us dangerous. The margins were never a punishment. They were a training ground. And from here, we go deeper. Tonight's sky does not whisper, it sharpens. Late on the night of January 25th, just before midnight Eastern Time, the moon locks into its first quarter phase. This is not a soft moment. This is a hinge, a threshold where intention stops being theoretical and begins demanding action. In lunar terms, the first quarter is where the question becomes unavoidable. What are you actually going to do with what you want? The new moon plants the seed. The crescent dreams. But the first quarter draws a line. This is the moment when desire must choose a direction or dissolve. And that matters deeply for witches. For much of the day, the moon has been moving through the last degrees of Aries, fire sign, initiator, spark. Aries energy is fast, brave, impulsive. It is the voice that says, I will. Aries is the courage to name yourself, to claim the word witch, to say, this is who I am, even if your voice shakes. But Aries alone burns out, so the moon does not stay there. As the first quarter exacts itself, the moon begins her shift toward Taurus, earth sign, sustainer, body. Taurus energy asks a harder question. What will you build that lasts? This is where many people falter, because fire is exciting, earth is demanding. Taurus asks for consistency, for patience, for care of the body that must carry the work. And this transition from Aries fire to Taurus earth is not gentle. It is fast. The sky does not give you days to adjust. It moves you forward whether you feel ready or not. This is not about mood. This is about commitment. This is the perfect sky for the witch as other, because otherness begins in fire, but survival requires earth. Aries says, I refuse to be erased. Taurus replies, then you must tend what you've claimed. This is the moment where rebellion matures into practice, where rage becomes responsibility, where naming yourself is no longer enough. You must now decide how you live as the thing you've named. Witches have always understood this rhythm. They did not survive by burning constantly. They survived by knowing when to root, when to plant, when to store, when to return to the body. The witch who lasts is not the loudest one. She is the one who knows how to sustain fire without destroying herself. While the moon is making this sharp turn, the larger sky is crowded with planets in Aquarius. Aquarius is the sign of outsiders, innovators, rebels, people who refuse inherited scripts. This creates a collective pressure to rethink identity, resist conformity, question who gets to define normal, safe, or acceptable. In other words, the sky is siding with the other. But Aquarius energy can stay abstract if you let it. It can live forever in ideas, communities, movements, and theories. The moon's move into Taurus says enough thinking. Who are you when it costs you comfort? This is where witchcraft stops being conceptual and starts being embodied. You may notice what's missing from tonight's sky. There's no major meteor shower demanding attention, no blazing comet, no cosmic fireworks to distract you from the work at hand. That absence is intentional. This is not a night for spectacle. This is a night for choosing what you will carry forward, quietly, steadily, and without applause. The first quarter moon does not ask for witnesses. It asks for follow-through. This lunar moment asks you to examine where you have named your truth but not yet lived it, where you are still running on adrenaline instead of nourishment, where your fire needs grounding, not suppression. For witches, especially those cast as other, this is the work that determines longevity. Anyone can burn brightly for a season. The witch who survives learns how to tend her body, protect her energy, root her practices in daily life, turn rebellion into rhythm. This is how magic becomes sustainable. This is how exile becomes home. So as the moon hardens into first quarter, just before midnight, consider this your invitation, not to rush, not to hide, not to burn yourself out proving anything to anyone, but to choose deliberately what you are willing to tend, because the fire has already been lit. The only question now is whether you will build a hearth around it or let it consume you. And witches know how to build hearths. If all of this talk of fire and courage has your nervous system buzzing, let's bring it back to the kitchen, where magic meets muscle memory, and you can literally eat your spell. Tonight's ritual is simple, grounding, and unapologetically sustaining. This is not aesthetic food. This is survival food that knows it's survived. Welcome to the spicy foil pouch of perseverance. What you'll need, or whatever close cousins you have because witches adapt. Baby Bella mushrooms for resilience. They thrive in shadow, regenerate quickly, and turn pressure into nourishment. Black beans for endurance, protein, and lineage. Beans feed revolutions quietly. Corn for sustenance, survival, and ancestral continuity. Red bell pepper for courage and vitality, sweetness before heat. Red onion for clarity and truth, the kind that makes your eyes water before it clears. Garlic for protection and honest speech. Garlic does not ask permission to exist. Olive oil for grounding, nourishment, and heart. Fresh lemon juice for brightness and awakening. Fire needs balance. Cayenne pepper, just a pinch, for agency. This is chosen heat. Crushed red pepper flakes for persistence and appropriate sting. Salt and black pepper for discernment. Optionally, you can microwave some quinoa or quick cook grains for grounding the spell into the body. Preheat your oven to a medium-high heat, somewhere in that I roast vegetables and I mean it range. While the oven heats, do your chopping. Slice the mushrooms thick enough that they won't disappear. Dice the red pepper. Slice the onion into half moons. Mince or smash the garlic. Release it fully. Open the beans and corn. Rinse them well. Let go of what they don't need anymore. As you chop and rinse, let yourself drop into the rhythm. This is not about speed. This is about presence. You can whisper over the cutting board if you want. For what I've survived, for what I'm still becoming, for every part of me that refused to stay down. Toss everything into a large bowl. Drizzle generously with olive oil. Squeeze in fresh lemon juice. Add garlic, salt, black pepper, cayenne, and crushed red pepper flakes, adjusting the heat to match the amount of fire you are willing to hold, not the amount you feel proves something. Add the beans and corn last, folding them in gently. Use your hands if you can. Touch matters. Coat every piece like you're telling it, you belong here. Tear off a generous sheet of foil. If you're parchment inside foil fancy, live your truth. Pile the mixture into the center and fold it into a sealed pouch, crimping the edges so the steam stays inside. Before it goes into the oven, hold the pouch for one full breath and say, aloud or silently, I have been pressed, but not destroyed. I have been tested, but not erased. What I've endured has made me flavorful. Place the pouch in the oven. Let it roast until the mushrooms are tender, the peppers and onions are soft with just a kiss of char, and everything smells like something real is happening. Fire transforms. Earth holds. When you take the pouch out, do not open it immediately. Set it down. Rest your hands just above it and feel the heat radiate upward. This is perseverance made visible. This is the proof that pressure can become nourishment. When you're ready, tear the pouch open and let the steam rise into your face. Inhale. This is your benediction. Serve this however your life allows. Over microwave quinoa or rice, alongside a crusty bread, or straight from a bowl, eaten standing at the counter like a feral kitchen deity. As you eat, notice the layers: sweetness, smoke, heat that arrives late and stays honest. Let it remind you, you are not palatable because you are easy. You are nourishing because you have history. This meal does not make you softer. It makes you steadier. It roots the fire you claimed under the Aries moon into something Taurus can sustain. And that, witches know, is how the work continues. We've walked through history. We've read the sky. We've fed the body. Now comes the part that matters, because knowing is not enough. Feeling is not enough. Naming is not enough. This is the moment where wanting turns into choosing. If it's safe for you to do so, I want you to grab a scrap of paper. Nothing ceremonial, nothing precious, a receipt, a notebook margin, the back of an envelope. Witches have never needed perfect tools. We've always worked with what was at hand. On that paper, write one thing you are done rolling over for. Just one. It might be an expectation that keeps you small, an apology you keep making for your existence, a fear that convinces you silence is safety. Write it in your own hand, slowly enough that your body feels the truth of it. This is not a confession. This is an acknowledgement. You are seeing it clearly for the first time. When you're ready, move to a place where there is safe fire, a candle, a fireplace, a fireproof bowl. If fire isn't available to you, hold the paper anyway. The choice still counts. Take a breath and say, out loud if you can, quietly if you must, I see what dims me. I will not keep feeding it. I choose my own flame. Then, if you're working with fire, light the paper. Watch how quickly it catches. Notice how little it takes for something old to change form. This is Aries energy, ignition, courage, the refusal to keep pretending. As the paper burns, don't rush past this moment. This is important because the first quarter moon is not about destruction, it's about commitment. So as the ash cools, place a hand over your heart or your belly and ask yourself honestly, what will I do differently now? Not perfectly, not forever, but next. This is Taurus entering the room. This is the body saying, I will carry this forward. You don't need to imagine approval from gods or ancestors, but if it helps, imagine this. A presence behind you, old, dry-humored, unimpressed by bullshit. She watches you do this small, brave thing and gives a crooked smile that says, yes, that, exactly that. Not because you were polished, not because you were fearless, but because you told the truth and chose not to abandon yourself. That's when she recognizes you. Take one last breath and let this settle. You are not the witch they feared. You are the witch they couldn't erase. You are the one who remembers, the one who survives, the one who takes everything that was labeled other and refuses to make it smaller. That refusal might be rebellion, but it absolutely is inheritance. Tonight, you met the witch as other, not as a costume, not as an aesthetic, but as a lived position in the world. This is the first doorway. In the weeks ahead, we will meet her other faces, the remembering, the maker, the mirror, the healer, the trickster, the bridge, the flame. Each one waiting further down the path. But for now, let this be enough. You crossed a threshold. You chose. You committed. That is the first spell. Wit, wisdom, witchcraft. Thank you, my weird witches, for giving me a little of your time and your beautiful attention today. If this episode stirred something in you, a memory, a spark, a question, a fire, please share it. Spread the word. That's how our circle grows. You can find me on socials at Ravens Lorecast on Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky, and at Ravens_lore_cast on Instagram and Threads. And if you've got a question, a story, a spellcraft request, or just the world's cutest familiar photo, email me at raven@ravenslorecast.com. I really do read them. Until next time, keep your fire tended, your humor wicked, and your heart brave and wide open. This is Raven Lorekeeper, signing off with love, grit, and a whisper of magic on your path.